Jasmine, let's start with this whole debate debacle, if you will. Donald Trump appeared in the video today, asked by our own NBC's Jake Traylor. Right. He appeared to undercut his own staff and say, telling reporters he'd prefer the mics to be on, but it's about what they agreed to. Is this another sign that Donald Trump actually doesn't know how to handle Vice President Harris, doesn't really know what he wants to do? Is this a sign that they are scared, or is this just a function of Donald Trump's staff doing what they're supposed to do as staff, and the candidate just, you know, running that proverbial bus right over them?
Well, I would love to be a fly on the wall of Susie and Chris's office when that happened. I mean, I think this is the process, right? This is a similar process to what the former president did before the Biden debate, going back and forth about the rules, questioning out loud why he should even do it, trying to undercut larger impressions of Biden being a good debater. I think that this is his process, really trying to put some pomp and circumstance and really hype it up. But I do think that there is a reality that the former president hasn't figured out exactly how to hit Vice President Harris. And so it's him really in real time trying to figure out what those lines of attack should be. And I think for the Harris campaign, they're excited right now. They recognize that something about the vice president, I won't say exactly what, triggers the former president. They know that he can get upset. And so they want the mics to be on because they want to kind of goad him into potentially a personal attack, because that is where they feel that if he makes a personal attack or if he encroaches on her space, as he did to Hillary Clinton in 2016, that could be used in their advantage.
You know, Hayes, at this point, it does seem as though the debate is in doubt. My wager is on that it is still going to happen, but, you know, I've lost money before. Who do you think needs it to happen more? It's a question of who wants it more. At this point, it seems as though the Harris campaign wants it more, but I do think there's a question on the table as if, do they need it? Who needs the debate?
I think, honestly, at this point, Harris does need it more, if only because thanks to this condensed election sprint that we're seeing, she really needs to be out in front of voters, people who have not been as tuned in as they should have been over the last 4 years as she has been vice president. So I think that she needs the opportunity to go toe-to-toe against Donald Trump and show the country what that looks like. She's the one who needs to be up on that debate stage, countering Trump, putting out the Democrats' message in a clear and concise way that, unfortunately, President Biden couldn't do in the first debate. And I get why they want have the mics on at this time. Like Jasmine was saying, it's about goading the president, and it's about, I get why the Biden camp wanted them off. They wanted President Biden to be able to deliver his message. That was their goal. The Harris campaign's goal is they know that she can deliver, even if Trump is trying to talk over her. They're hoping that Trump says something during his time with the mics on when it's not his turn that is so off message and so off-putting that it puts her over the top.
I mean, it's not a bad strategy. I mean, Tyler, again, I think the debate is still happening. The candidates are preparing as though the debate is happening. What can you tell us about the various camps' preparations?
Yeah, so as we were just talking about, the vice president had started debate preparations, assuming she would debate Senator J.D. Vance. Her team had cast Philippe Rines to play J.D. Vance in mock debate preps, though that had not formally started. But they were fully underway, preparing for a debate in which she would play in that undercard role, similar to what she did in 2020. And then obviously things shifted quite dramatically. And so she has a team of aides that prepared her in 2020. They are once again leading that debate prep. They've pulled in some longtime aides, particularly policy aides that have worked closely with the vice president to help her prepare some political aids. They're starting to hold mock debates at Howard University, obviously where she attended, a space she has returned to throughout her political career for big moments, but also for some practice. And so we expect to see those continue to ramp up, continuing to hold some more of those mock sessions. In a more traditional manner of going over policy, going over ideas, and then moving into those sort of formal mock debates. Trump, obviously, as with most things, has sort of a different practice here. We do know that he underwent some prep before the Biden debate. I think that him and his advisors felt that that went extremely well. That is why we're seeing some of this back and forth over what the rules are going to look like, because Trump, by all accounts, his team was very satisfied with how that debate performance. He's privately told people it went too well that he kicked Joe Biden out off the ticket in his telling of it. So he will also, I think, continue to have some of those less traditional debate preparations, going over some policy. There's some reporting that former Democratic Representative Tulsi Gabbard has become involved.
Is she
helping out a little bit? Obviously, she sparred with Kamala Harris in those 2019 Democratic primary debates, so she's been enlisted to help out. Obviously, now becoming a surrogate for the former president. So non-traditional experience there, but I do think this debate over the debate rules shows the anxiety and the stakes for both sides. As you said, arguably the most important date before Election Day for these two candidates. So much has changed over the last month, and that's the last time or the only time Americans will see them in the same place.
Yeah, I mean, look, I will just say the last time we were talking about a debate of this magnitude, it was between President Biden and former President Trump. And I've talked to many people that believe, sans that debate, Joe Biden would still be at this point at the top of the ticket. I guess my question is how the strategic decision to have this very internal conversation spill out into the rest of the world this morning. Because last night when we went to sleep, this was not a focal point that everyone was aware of, this debate about the microphone.
I actually think that this has been just the pattern that was in place with when Biden was on the ticket, right? They kind of put that first marker down saying, we want to have the debate. These are our requirements. This is the time we want to have them. These are the networks that we want to have them. And at first, the Trump campaign tried to add on to that. And the Biden campaign was like, no, we're not doing that. And then they basically acquiesced. Here again, you see the Now Harris campaign putting out their own markers of what they want to happen. And just like previously, the Trump campaign has acquiesced. I wonder if we're going to see that again now. But there's a real point, I think, to make about the significance of this debate and how it's going to set up the rest of the days in the campaign. Obviously, that June 27th debate did not go the way that Democrats wanted. Here again, they're kind of goading the Trump campaign to show up, and they believe that because they have a different candidate at the top of the ticket, that it will go differently. But of course, I think there is a lot of potential downside here for the vice president. Because she is not in the practice of engaging with reporters, because she's not in the practice of having these unscripted moments. Yes, we know that she prepares, sometimes over-prepares for these big, high-stakes moments, but still, because she's not in the practice outside of that debate space, right, she could be potentially caught on the back foot. Of course, that's a place that we know that she likes to be, because she is a prosecutor, because she likes to go back and forth in these high-profile moments, but still, I think that there is a downside for her potentially if she does not perform well, and of course, the same is there for Trump.
And just to add on to that, that's something that we heard leading into the Biden-Trump debate, that there were people raising concerns that Biden was not engaging enough with reporters, was not doing enough public events to really be prepared for that sort of back and forth. The first time he was off teleprompter, off script, just sort of challenged on his feet, we're sort of seeing some of those similar concerns start to creep out of the Democratic Party ahead of what is ultimately the most important appearance of her campaign.
Well, I mean, Hayes, let's talk about this. What folks are talking about is the lack of a sit-down interview that the vice president has yet to do since she has become the Democratic nominee. The Harris team has said that she will, in fact, sit for an interview by the end of the month. The end of the month is this week, folks. It is. It's Friday. What do you think is most important for the vice president to get across in that interview, and to whom is she getting it across to? Because I've raised this issue with voters, former colleagues of mine, as well as folks in the media apparatus, and everyone feels a little bit differently.
I think that in this case, the people that she's trying to reach, I think, are the people who, I'm not going to lie, I think that it really does come down to sort of the elites who are behind her. They support her. They agree with her. I'm talking about elites in the Democratic Party, and to a lesser extent, us, the elite in the media, to be able to say that she can think extemporaneously, it can talk about policy without a teleprompter in front of her, to prove that she has the chops, I guess, to really be the person who is able to lead the country. I think that's the sort of focus of what an interview is supposed to do. It's supposed to show the people who are watching, and yes, there are going to be, whenever she does do a sit-down interview, there will be millions of average Americans who at least get glimpses of it, who see clips of it online, the highlight reel of it. And they will take away from that however she performs. But I think that the focus on having this very specific sort of format, she has to sit down with an interviewer who asks her what is, in our minds, tough questions and be able to have good answers. Like, that is a metric that people who are used to watching politics are looking for, and that until Harris does put that forward, people are going to continue to ask these questions about whether she can do it. And I personally think that there is something a little bit self-centered in that, as we are trying to help shape what is going on in this campaign, we as the media, but it is still important for her to show that she does have the grasp on all of the issues, on how to, and this, I guess, almost sort of gravitas that is necessary to be president and carry out the functions of the office.